Imagine you are 9 months pregnant, and it is 30,000 years ago. There is no hospital, no pain medication, no sterile room, no emergency number, no surgeon waiting behind a pair of swinging doors. There is just you, a fire, a shelter made from wood and animal hide, and a baby that has chosen tonight to begin forcing its way into the world. And here is the part that should make your entire body uncomfortable. Human childbirth is not mechanically simple. The baby's head is large. The passage through the pelvis is tight and curved. The shoulders have to follow. The baby often has to rotate while it is being born, which is an impressive first assignment for someone who has not technically entered the world yet. If anything went badly wrong, there was no C-section coming, no blood transfusion, no antibiotics, no machine monitoring a heartbeat. And yet every person alive today is descended from an unbroken line of women who made it through. Not one lucky birth. Thousands of generations of them. So how did ancient humans survive childbirth? The answer is not that birth was easy. It was not. It is not that ancient women possessed some lost superhuman body that modern people no longer have. They did not. And it is definitely not that everyone simply squatted behind a bush, gave birth in 5 minutes, and went back to gathering berries before lunch. The real answer is more interesting. Ancient humans survived childbirth because they almost never faced it as individuals. They faced it as groups. Long before hospitals, before written medicine, and possibly before our species even existed in its modern form, birth had already become one of humanity's first cooperative technologies. But to understand why help became so important, we need to begin with the problem evolution created. Humans walk on 2 legs. That one fact changed almost everything about our skeleton. Compared with an ape moving mainly on 4 limbs, a human pelvis has to support the organs above it, stabilize the body, anchor powerful muscles, and transfer weight from the spine into the legs every time you take a step. At the same time, humans evolved unusually large brains. Large adult brains begin as relatively large infant heads, and those heads must pass through a bony opening that cannot simply stretch out of the way. For years this was explained with one neat phrase, the obstetrical dilemma. Walking upright supposedly demanded a narrow pelvis, while growing bigger brains demanded a wider one. Evolution compromised, and women were left giving birth through an opening barely large enough for the baby. It is a compelling story. It is also too simple. Modern research suggests the pelvis was shaped by many pressures at once: locomotion, support of the pelvic floor, body size, climate, fetal growth, metabolism, and the need to give birth. Even the claim that human childbirth is uniquely tight compared with every other primate is now being re-examined. Evolution, as usual, did not solve one clean engineering problem. It inherited a building with 6 owners, contradictory safety codes, and absolutely no option to knock it down and start again. But whatever combination of pressures produced it, the human birth canal is complicated. It is not a straight tube. Its dimensions change from the entrance to the exit. A baby's head typically enters in one orientation, turns during descent, and emerges in another. Then the shoulders must rotate through as well. That rotation creates a strange human problem. Many non-human primates give birth with the infant facing toward the mother. The mother can reach down, guide the newborn, clear its airway, and pull it toward her body. Human babies commonly emerge facing away from the mother. If a mother reaches down and pulls at the wrong moment, she could bend the infant's spine in the wrong direction. Someone positioned in front of her can see what is happening far more easily than she can. In other words, human anatomy may have turned childbirth into a situation where a second pair of hands was enormously valuable. And that may be one reason birth assistance is so widespread across human cultures. We cannot dig up a prehistoric midwife. Skills do not fossilize. Advice whispered beside a fire leaves no skeleton. A hand supporting a laboring woman for 12 hours does not become an artifact for an archaeologist to label. This makes childbirth one of the most important events in prehistory and one of the hardest to see. But we can look at human behavior. Across traditional societies documented by anthropologists, women commonly receive help during labor from mothers, sisters, experienced older women, partners, or specialist birth attendants. The exact customs vary enormously. The recurring feature is company, and it makes sense. An attendant can provide water. She can support the mother's weight. She can massage her back, encourage her, Help her change position, watch the progress of the birth, receive the baby, clear material from its mouth and nose, manage the cord, keep the newborn warm, and recognize when something is going dangerously wrong. None of those actions requires a hospital. None requires writing. But together they can separate a difficult birth from a fatal one. Think about how knowledge would accumulate. One woman notices that a certain position makes labor easier. Another learns that a newborn who is cold and quiet needs to be dried, rubbed, and held against warm skin. Someone sees a cord wrapped around a baby's neck and learns how to loosen it. Someone else learns, through a memory she probably wishes she did not have, which kinds of bleeding do not stop on their own. The people who survive remember. They teach their daughters. They teach younger women who may not be relatives. A useful technique moves from one birth to the next, then across generations, without ever being written down. That is medicine before medical textbooks. Observation, memory, practice, and transmission. And it may be far older than Homo sapiens. We know that earlier human species cared for injured and disabled group members who could not have survived alone. Fossils show individuals living for years with serious impairments. That does not prove they had midwives, but it does show that cooperation and long-term care did not suddenly appear when somebody invented a waiting room. Neanderthals lived in social groups, cared for vulnerable members, and possessed detailed practical knowledge of their environments. Their babies presented many of the same fundamental demands: pregnancy, labor, feeding, warmth, protection, and years of dependence. It would be extraordinary if such socially capable humans treated birth as a completely solitary event. We should be careful here. Likely is not the same as proven. The evidence cannot tell us the name of the first birth attendant, what she said, or whether she specialized in birth. But the anatomy and the cross-cultural pattern point in the same direction. Assisted birth probably has very deep roots. And the help did not begin only when labor started. Pregnancy in a mobile hunter-gatherer community was not 9 months of lying still. Women walked, gathered food, processed plants, carried objects, cared for children, and moved with the group. Their bodies were accustomed to deep squatting, kneeling, climbing, and long periods of movement from childhood. That matters because birth position is not just a cultural detail. In many societies, women have given birth kneeling, squatting, sitting, standing, leaning forward, or being supported under the arms. Upright positions use gravity and allow the pelvis and surrounding joints to move differently than when someone lies flat on her back. The familiar image of a woman lying in a bed with her legs raised is not the universal human birth position. It is largely a product of later institutional medicine and the convenience of the people attending the birth. Ancient women did not have an adjustable hospital bed, but they did have something surprisingly useful: freedom to move. They could follow pain, pressure, fatigue, and instinct. They could brace against a post, hang from another person, kneel on the ground, or change position when progress stopped. An experienced attendant could suggest what had worked before. Did that make every birth safe? Absolutely not. Some complications do not care how experienced the midwife is. A baby can be positioned sideways. The shoulders can become trapped. The placenta can block the opening. Labor can continue until the mother is exhausted. The uterus can rupture. The placenta can fail to detach. Bleeding can become catastrophic in minutes. Infection can enter through damaged tissue after the birth, invisible and unstoppable. Ancient people had strategies. They did not have miracles. This is where the archaeological record becomes haunting. Death in childbirth is difficult to identify from bones because most causes leave no permanent mark on the skeleton. A woman who died from hemorrhage looks, thousands of years later, like a woman who died from many other causes. Unless a fetus remained in or near the pelvis, archaeology may never reveal that a birth was taking place. And even those cases are difficult to interpret. Bodies shift after burial. Burial customs can place infants beside adults. Soft tissue disappears. A scene that looks obvious may not be obvious at all, but a few discoveries freeze the danger with brutal clarity. At an early Neolithic cemetery near Lake Baikal in Siberia, archaeologists described the burial of a young woman with the remains of 2 near-term infants. Their position suggested an obstructed twin birth. One infant may have been partially delivered while the second remained inside. Mother and babies appear to have died together roughly 7,700 years ago. It is an exceptionally rare archaeological glimpse of something that must have happened many times. Twins would have turned an already dangerous event into a crisis. There was no ultrasound to reveal that two babies were coming. No scheduled surgery. No blood bank. The attendants may not have understood what was wrong until labor had already become impossible. And yet most births did not end that way. If they had, humanity would not be here. So what did ancient birth attendants actually do? The honest answer is that the deeper into prehistory we go, the less specific we can be. Written records arrive very late in the story. Ancient Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Mesopotamian, Indian, and Chinese traditions eventually documented birth practices, but those civilizations appeared hundreds of thousands of years after our ancestors had already been giving birth successfully. Still, later records can show the kinds of knowledge people developed without modern equipment. They used touch to judge the baby's position. They watched the rhythm and progress of contractions. They supported different labor positions. They prepared cloth, water, blades, cord ties, oils, and warming materials. They protected the mother from cold and helped control who entered the birth space. They used rituals, prayers, songs, amulets, and familiar voices to reduce fear and give the event meaning. Some remedies may have offered real relief. Warmth, hydration, massage, physical support, and calm reassurance can matter. Certain plants contain compounds that affect pain or uterine contractions. But this is where romantic stories about ancient medicine become dangerous. Natural does not mean safe. A plant strong enough to change labor can also cause poisoning, violent contractions, bleeding, or death. Dosage would have varied. Identification could fail. Some remedies worked. Some did nothing. Some made everything worse. Ancient knowledge was impressive, but it was purchased through trial and error, and the errors were human lives. The greatest survival tool may not have been an herb or a special position. It may have been emotional support. That sounds soft until you understand what fear does to a body. Labor is painful, exhausting, and unpredictable. A frightened person alone in the dark is facing not only the physical process but the possibility that nobody will notice when she becomes too weak to help herself. A trusted attendant changes the environment. She brings familiarity. She can say that what is happening is normal or recognize that it is not. She can maintain warmth, food, water, movement, and attention over many hours. Modern evidence shows that continuous support during labor can improve the experience and some birth outcomes. Ancient women did not need a randomized clinical trial to notice that being abandoned was worse. This may be why birth became surrounded by female networks in so many cultures. Older women had seen births before. Grandmothers were living libraries. A woman who had survived several deliveries carried information that could not be replaced by strength alone. Human menopause becomes interesting here. Women often live for decades after their own reproductive years, which is unusual among mammals. There are several competing explanations for why, and childbirth assistance is not a complete answer. But older women can contribute food, childcare, knowledge, and support to daughters and grandchildren. A grandmother helping a new mother is not merely being kind. She may be increasing the survival of her own descendants. The baby, meanwhile, arrived spectacularly unfinished. A newborn horse may stand within hours. A human newborn cannot hold up its own head. It cannot move to safety, regulate its temperature reliably, or feed without being positioned close to another body. Human babies are not uniquely helpless among all mammals, but compared with other primates they require an extraordinary amount of care for an extraordinary length of time. This vulnerability is connected to the same evolutionary story. Much human brain growth happens after birth. Instead of completing development inside the mother until the child can function independently, humans continue that development in a social world. That shifts part of reproduction outside the body. Birth is not the finish line. It is a transfer of responsibility from one body to an entire group. The mother needs food while she recovers and produces milk. The newborn needs constant warmth and protection. Other children still need care. If the group moves, someone must carry supplies, the infant, or both. A mother doing every task alone would face an almost impossible energy budget. So humans evolved a system sometimes described as cooperative breeding. Fathers, grandparents, siblings, and unrelated group members can all help care for children. Not every society divides that work in the same way, and not every mother receives enough support. But compared with a species in which the mother does everything alone, humans are unusually willing to feed, carry, protect, and teach children who are not solely their own responsibility. That cooperation may have allowed our babies to remain dependent while their brains became more adaptable. Helplessness looks like a weakness if you examine one infant. Examine the whole community, and it becomes part of a different strategy. The baby's survival depended on people. So did the mothers. But there is an uncomfortable question waiting here. If humans were so cooperative and ancient women were physically active, why did so many still die? Because culture can reduce biological danger. It cannot erase it. For nearly all human history, pregnancy was a repeated risk. One successful birth did not make the next one safe. A woman might experience multiple pregnancies, each carrying new possibilities for obstruction, hemorrhage, infection, hypertension, malpresentation, miscarriage, or stillbirth. Even a modest risk per birth becomes frightening when repeated many times. Nutrition mattered too. Hunter-gatherer diets were often varied, but food security was never guaranteed. Drought, winter, disease, conflict, and failed hunts could leave pregnant women depleted. Later, the transition to agriculture created its own problems. Farming supported larger populations, but many early agricultural communities depended heavily on a limited number of crops. Diets could become less diverse. People lived in denser settlements with waste, contaminated water, and infectious disease. More food in total did not automatically mean a healthier mother. And then there was infection. Ancient attendants did not know about bacteria, but that does not mean they knew nothing about cleanliness. Humans can recognize that foul material, dirty water, or decomposing tissue is dangerous without understanding microbes. Communities could develop rules about washing, isolation, clean cloth, smoke, heat, or who was permitted near a laboring woman. Some practices probably reduced infection. Others probably increased it. The problem was that nobody could see the enemy or explain why one woman recovered while another developed fever days later. Even much later, supposedly advanced physicians sometimes made childbirth more dangerous by moving between corpses and laboring women without cleaning their hands. Ancient ignorance was not unique. Confidence has killed nearly as efficiently as superstition. What finally changed the odds was not one invention. It was an accumulation: anatomical knowledge, trained midwifery, hand hygiene, antisepsis, antibiotics, blood transfusion, safer surgery, prenatal screening, management of blood pressure, and rapid transport when an emergency occurred. Modern medicine did not make birth serious. Birth was always serious. Modern medicine made many of its most lethal complications survivable. That distinction matters because it is tempting to look backward and imagine two equally false versions of the past. In one version, ancient women were helpless, ignorant, and constantly dying until male doctors arrived to save them. That ignores immense bodies of knowledge developed and transmitted by women across generations. In the other version, ancient childbirth was natural, effortless, and safe until modern medicine interfered. That ignores the mothers and babies whose deaths are almost invisible in the archaeological record. The truth sits between those stories. Ancient birth attendants were skilled because the danger was real. Women used movement, social support, observation, touch, memory, and accumulated experience because those were the best tools available. Those tools saved lives. Sometimes they were not enough. And now we can finally answer the question: how did ancient humans survive childbirth? They survived through bodies shaped by millions of years of selection, but those bodies were never perfect machines. They survived by moving through labor rather than following one universal position. They survived through practical knowledge carried from one generation of women to the next. They survived because mothers, sisters, grandmothers, partners, and attendants stayed beside them. They survived because when a baby arrived unable to survive alone, the group absorbed the burden. And sometimes, they did not survive at all. Every living person stands at the end of an unbroken chain of successful births, but that chain casts a shadow made of people whose names, voices, and struggles were never recorded. Women who labored on cave floors, beneath hide shelters, inside mud brick houses, and beside fires while someone held their hands and tried to remember what the older women had taught them. There is no first midwife preserved in history. No monument marks the moment one human first knelt beside another and realized that birth was easier with help. But that realization may be one of the oldest technologies our species possesses. Older than writing, older than farming, possibly older than Homo sapiens. Long before humans built hospitals, we built circles around people in danger. And before any of us survived the world, someone first helped us enter it.